The Institute for the Study of Human Flourishing, funded by a generous grant from the John Templeton Foundation, is guided by the Templeton Mission Statement to advance human well-being, support research on the big questions, promote character development, individual freedom and free markets, and to stimulate spiritual progress.
The Institute for the Study of Human Flourishing, we want to make a difference at the University of Oklahoma. We want to make a difference in the state of Oklahoma. But we also hope to embody what I think is one of the best traditions of the academic world at large, and that is the spirit of collaboration.
The Institute is an interesting combination of academics and real-world community outreach. We have our postdocs, we have 3 new postdocs, 2 dissertation fellows. We're going to keep that going, and that's all funded by the Templeton Grant.
My research at my previous institution included developing a measure of intellectual humility. What are some of the outcomes associated with being either high or low in intellectual humility? So I'll be continuing that research.
My research while I'm here is on value-behavior concordance, as I call it, bringing one's values and behavior into alignment. Does the type of things that adolescents value make a difference for well-being outcomes in their lives? And what we find is that when adolescents prioritize values that have to do with giving back to the community, with being in control of their own thoughts and their own lives, those things tend to lead to a greater sense that one's life is meaningful.
Wanted to be able to have programs for the development of moral and intellectual and civic virtues in students. And then we wanted to also be a center for outreach to the business community, to high schools, and to be a center for researchers all over the world who would connect with us and come and visit, and we would collaborate with them on research projects.
And Nancy Snow, incredible leader and really visionary, and has, I think, laid the foundations for an intellectual community that will ask really profound questions in a new way, and I think can, in the long run, provide some really extraordinary answers to some big, almost timeless questions.
There really is a serious need in our culture for programs to develop virtues, because we live in a democracy where it's really important that the citizens are good citizens. So we wanted to be able to have programs for the development of moral and intellectual and civic virtues in students.
People want to say, what are some really fundamental reasons why we build a system of higher education? And the Institute, I think, answers that in some really powerful and profound ways.
The way that I see the Institute's role is really promoting the sense of social justice across the community. So in order to meet the needs of the students and families, not just students, but the families that play a big role in their success within school settings, I think the Institute has been developed at a really critical moment within this community.
Well, one of the major initiatives is to try and help our schools to flourish. And so the Institute and SALT, we feel like that's one of the greatest causes we can perhaps get involved in, is to try and help children.
One of the core values that we hold is that education is a human right, and we most often see that right maybe least expressed with minority and poverty-stricken communities. There are just swaths of kids in our city who are poorly educated and poorly supported, and then their options are radically limited. So our work is fundamentally that, the restoration of the basic human right of education with the kids that we work with.
To think about education in terms of helping students develop civic virtues and having an explicit conversation about the role of a university in preparing students for citizenship by helping them sharpen, helping them develop, helping them grow civic virtues like empathy, like civility.
The citizenship, this idea that I'm part of something bigger than myself, that I'm contributing to a greater cause, scholarship, addressing the academic nature and what it means to be a scholar and what it means to have curiosity and learn and a love for learning. And then of course the character piece.
I really think in a democracy it's very important that all of us have virtues like open-mindedness, paying attention to the views of others, intellectual humility, being able to admit that we can be wrong, intellectual courage, being able to stand up for what you believe even when the people around you think differently. And I think it's really important that it starts with students because they're future voters and future leaders of the country.
I think one of the really exciting and gratifying things about the work of the Institute is how many faculty it's reached.
I think it's important to help not only guide first-year students in those cognitive skills that will help them be successful in college and beyond, but also those non-cognitive things that will help them be successful. So the intellectual virtues, looking at open-mindedness, looking at intellectual humility, love of learning, but also looking at things such as executive virtues, that self-regulation, that perseverance that is so needed, those as well. We provide exemplars, people who have these characteristics that they can look to as models for that.
They're really virtues for life in general, and they go beyond just professional practice, but I realized as I was walking through them that all of them have a really strong connection to the practice of journalism.
Where we have seen the most success is with our Camp Impact, providing that 3-day opportunity for students to look at virtue in an intensive setting. And so we spend a day looking at theoretical side of virtue and what it is. Then we spend a day doing service at a local homeless shelter here in Oklahoma City. We also had students go to the Capitol, look at civic virtue in those ways as well.
Scott Beck is very, very interested in character development and human flourishing. And they have done work on their mission. They've done work integrating that into their classrooms. They've taken advantage of the things the Institute has to offer. They were our first partner high school. We're very fortunate to have them on board.
For a long time we've had conversations about we're doing more than just academic work. I mean, this is about a complete person. So this idea of flourishing and what does that mean, and how do we help students really build fulfilling lives? This summer, the Institute actually hosted a week-long training for teachers, talking about character, talking about character strengths and beyond. Gail was actually part of a team that we sent to that.
Gail will be using the knowledge that she has to do professional development work in high schools in and around Norman. I've watched her integrate character development into her class sessions, so she can really strategize with teachers in the classroom to get the character development message across.
My big question for the whole year in my classes is, who are you? What are you going to do with this great, grand, glorious life that you've been given? And what are you going to contribute to the world?
So everything that we're doing is really running through that filter. Everything is running through this filter of developing them as a person.
So the idea here is that we need to have bridges between the academic study, which goes at an altitude of about 10,000 feet, and then the sort of boots on the ground approach, where you're talking about students in their actual lives and actually forming the character of students.
There's a lot of pressure, I think, living in modern life, and a lot of these virtues, by just looking at them, I mean, they're intuitive, how they might relate to our quality of life. They're timeless. They're not particularly controversial in any way. However, they're not easy to implement.
How do we not be just 1,000 points of light with no high beam focus on anything, but how do we organize in a fashion in which we bring the full giftedness and the resources of not only Christians, but also people of good heart that want to join in. But that really requires metrics, and it requires being able to partner up with folks who really come at it with that.
The Institute is secular, OU is secular, and in terms of community outreach, the faith-based community organizations are doing the lion's share of the work. So we walk along with our community and education partners, and we try to help them. So the idea is that the Institute is here for the long haul.
To have a partnership with somebody like the Institute right down the road at OU where it's easily accessible, just to have that resource close by is game-changing for us. And I think what the work of the Institute and the work of the organizations in which we serve and what I think is just going on in Oklahoma City right now is a resurgence of hope. To be able to tell teachers and administrators and families and students, listen, hope is possible and it's coming. And I think that's one of the major things that the Institute is helping to provide for us.
It's not just an interesting study of how to live, but we promote it as a good way to live. We have outreach to education, to community and civic organizations, to businesses, and to parents. Templeton is changing the face of scholarship in academia on the issues of virtue and flourishing. But with this particular initiative, it's changing the face of the community.